Hello, and welcome to Driving Systems of High Performance, a podcast all about enabling high-performing teams to become the best version of themselves. I'm Alexis Williams, Head of Strategic Alliances at Atlassian. I'm here with my co-host, Christian Kelly of Accenture, and today we are joined by two special guests from the world of Formula One, Bernie Collins and Otmar Szafnauer, and together we're sitting down with a live audience at the Atlassian office in Austin, Texas. We've been spending a lot of time talking about strategic planning and priorities. I want to switch gears a little bit to the actual strategy to execution side, right? And so when you think about just all of the numerous distinct teams that are coming together, can you describe how you think about driving alignment to the overall strategy with all of these different teams coming in from different angles and perspectives?
For me, everybody's got to know what the ultimate goal is. And the bigger the organization, the harder it is to communicate that and spend time and effort to know what your objectives are and what that team, whatever team it is, should be doing. What's a 10 out of 10? You know, and I look at sports teams, right? So say you're a tennis player. You don't have to communicate the goal with anyone. It's just you. If you're a golfer, it's you and your caddy. There's two of you. If you're a basketball team, there's 5 of you. Suddenly, with a basketball team, the coach gets involved. You have timeouts. You start communicating. Your goal is to win, but you have all this sub stuff going on so that you can win. And then a soccer team, even bigger. A Formula One team, 1,000 people. How many of you are there at Atlassian?
At Atlassian? About 13,000?
13,000. At 13,000, you have to communicate what that goal is and then align. Everybody should but if you don't know what the goal is, and you can do it really simply, just go around and ask people, what's your objective when you come to work? Just ask everyone and see if you're all aligned. Probably not.
I think just to pick up on that is once you've got that goal set, then how do you achieve that? So on a race team, how do we achieve it?
That's a different thing.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
So like to give an example, in Bahrain, that race we just talked about, and we'll talk about it because it's the only win I had anyway, but we had 50 seconds from
I had one more, twice.
We had 50 seconds from Checo crashing to deciding if we needed to do a pit stop or not. And we had 50 seconds to check tyre information, front wing information, engine information, all of the data that's coming in, and the driver information, which in this instance is the least accurate source of data because he's emotional, he's just had a crash, he's been off track. So how in that 50 seconds do you make that decision? Do you go through all the data? Well, you can't do it alone. I talk a lot about trust your experts. I can't look at the aero data and decide if the front wing's okay, and I definitely can't do it in 50 seconds. I probably couldn't do it in a week. So I need to trust the aero department to give me that information. I need to trust the tyre department to give me their information. I need to trust the guy who's looking at the video cameras to tell me what section of the car is damaged, and that focuses everyone to look at that section on their individual bit of data. But we are a team. We have people who are expert in their individual parts of the car, and they need to come together in that time to help formulate the decision. No decision on a pit wall is made alone as a silo. It's made with lots of information coming together, and that information is what makes the decision. So you need to trust your experts in each of your groups. There will be experts in certain things, and you need all of those people working at their maximum capacity to get the best out of the team.
So let's talk about that in scaling it. I loved your analogy about, hey, if it's just me and I'm out there, playing tennis, it's just me, and then you scale to teams. Yeah.
I know exactly what my objective is and what I have to do.
So in prepping to get to a race, all the off-season stuff, all the car builds, all of that, how do you keep the communication of that strategy or those goals to those 1,000 people on the 25 teams so you keep them on target, on goal? How do you do that in a big team?
So I'll give you a couple of examples. So Formula One's quite easy. It's the stopwatch that tells you how, but there's all sorts of sub-teams that, like Bernie said, that contribute to that. You know, there's the aero team, there's the design team, there's a vehicle dynamics team, there's APG, there's the strategist, there's all sorts of race engineers, race car drivers, all those sub-teams. You've got to keep them aligned.
Sounds like every big technology organization that we collectively work with.
But I'll tell you, and I remember this distinctly. We went to Hungary one year, and they changed it was the amplitude of the rumble strips of the curbs. And we, coming out of, I think it was the last corner, we went over the curbs, and over time, we broke the rear suspension. Is that when Hulkenberg roll hooped it?
Possibly, because that's when they changed the exit of that corner.
Yeah, exactly. So we had a massive accident because the rear suspension broke. Mid-season for us, right? But huge. Your rear suspension is now failing. You shouldn't be able to drive the car from FIA, and you could kill a driver.
So major disruption in your business.
Major disruption.
Yeah.
The next race was Spa, I think. And Spa is, people have died at Spa. It's high speed. You have a suspension failure there, you could kill a driver. So we had to redesign, retest, re-R&D, and remake new suspension within 2 weeks for the next race. And we did. Now, how do you do that? Everybody knows it's a sub-objective that that's what you're doing. You get the team together, everybody, and that's what you're working on. And as a boss then, I'm not a suspension designer. I don't know what to do. I'm not a stress engineer. But every once in a while, I would go and say, how are we coming along? Are we going to make it? How many of these rear suspension, how many wishbones are we going to have for Spa? Can we get 5? Is it only going to be 3? And as a boss, if you ask those questions, or as a leader, it just shows that's our priority. Not that you need to show it, but it works. That's our priority. It's a sub-priority, but it's the priority then. And everyone's aligned. And we did it. We did it. And that is teamwork. And that, again, psychological safety. We didn't blame anyone. You know, Akio was the chief designer. We didn't go to Akio and say, you screwed up. No, it was the team. And we fixed it. And off we went. And I remember it now. I thought that was superb because it takes a heck of a lot longer than 2 weeks to design, build, test suspension of a Formula One car. But we had to do it.
It seems like communication is also so incredibly critical. And so how, as leaders, are you communicating the strategy in a way that is consumable to everyone?
So you get everyone together, you tell them what the objective is and what the goal is, and then underneath that, the managers, the leaders, you just check, just like I said. You go 3 days in, how are we coming along? Is the design done? Are we on target? Are the manufacturing guys ready for this? Are they working simultaneously with you to be ready? And you just check, just ask those questions.
Just to pick up a bit on the communication more from like the racing side, if you're on the pit wall, it's a heated situation. We have lots of different nationalities. Not English is everyone's first language. Some of us are Irish and therefore a bit hard to understand when we get too excited. So there's lots going on, right? But if we've ever had a problem, if we've ever had a fault, something miscommunicated, we find a way to make sure it doesn't happen again. So we speak in very clear words where we can. We spend a lot of time briefing. The main point of our briefing is to make sure that everyone goes into the session on the same page. You know, Friday's FP1 session is going to be 1 hour long. So you've got 1 hour to learn everything you can about that track, that car, that driver for this weekend. So if you go in with slightly misaligned priorities, we've had races in the past where someone thought the track was getting wetter, someone thought it was getting drier. All of this sort of thing is solved by just briefing the people. Are you on the same page? Are you actually aligned about what's going on? And we try to communicate as much as we can pictorially. So even to the driver in the car on the steering wheel, you'll see lots of reds and greens. Easy to understand. Red is bad, green is good, you know? So we try and, if we can take away any of the manual calculation they need to do, if we can present it in a very clear way that there's lack of room for understanding, those really help, the communication side, particularly when it's that heated situation that people are emotional and stressed.
I have to follow up on that one because of what we do.
I know exactly where
where
you're going with this.
Atlassian is and what Accenture does in this space for our customers. It seems like what you're saying is that there's a lot of design work that goes into the technology to make those decisions easier. Talk about that. Like, how much design work actually goes into putting the right things in the heads-up display or on the steering wheel to make better decisions?
So I'll give what I think is a really easy example. And this example has stood, there's a few times in your life in F1 where you'll make some poor decisions and they stay with you forever, right? So we have strategy mathematically is easy. It is generally one lap time, take away another lap time. That is simple maths, right? Everyone can do that, that's easy to do. But in those heated pressure situations, people panic, people get a number wrong, slightly misunderstood. I was always very good at like rounding something roughly because it got the intent across and then someone would correct it because that's not right to 2 decimal places or whatever. So we would try and take away as much of the overhead, even very simple overhead as we could. To give the example, so in Russia, quite a few years ago, it was going dry to wet. It was the final laps of the race. I see someone in a McLaren jersey and you might understand because it was one where Norris didn't win the race because he didn't do a pit stop. Now, we were very lucky in our time that the drivers generally reacted to calls that were made from the pit wall wholeheartedly. And like Otmar just said, we would discuss them after we go through it. We'd try and figure out. And in Russia, we told both drivers to stop because we could see on the radar it was raining and we knew that it was coming. So we decided with both cars to stop. And neither car stopped. Both cars got to the final turn of the race. The track there was quite dry. And they looked at the track and went, these guys are idiots. It's quite dry, right? And then they went round turn 1. And they were like, it's quite wet round here, actually. It's like, well, yeah, we knew that, right? So, and that you can walk away from the race and you can go, well, you just need to listen to us next time. That is one solution. That's not going to work because the driver's emotional, he's in the car. So what we did is I listened to all of the intercom. What we told the driver, were we strong enough? I didn't think we were strong enough. And on our pit wall, we created a track map that from that day forward, we coloured different colours based on the temperature of the track at that point. So to remind us that if the pit entry was very dry or conversely very wet, we would need to get that across to the driver. So we ended up with a colour-coded map, really simple, right? But that's the first time we'd had that issue that they didn't listen to us. And from that moment, like literally the next race forward, we have a software solution to that map such that we know in our heads we need to be clear with the driver. We need to tell him turn 1's wet. We are now aware the pit entry's dry. So for everything, and what I would try and impress upon you as much as I can is never stop at the first answer. It's easy to just go, the drivers are idiots, but that's not the right answer. Look at all the software you can put in around that.
The drivers will remain idiots. We have to do something different such that they don't do this again.
What's that quote you like to say? Make it really, really hard to do the wrong things and really, really easy to do the right things.
And I like that you turned that around in such a small amount of time. You went from like problem, prototype, then software that actually helps make that happen.
That's one thing that happens in Formula One. Once we make those mistakes, and we make them often, like I mentioned with the redesign of the suspension, that was from one race to another. And same with this. Once you know you've got a problem and the solution will help you in the future, you don't stop. It's very, very quick. And the reason for that is the value of winning is so high that you do anything in your power to get you a little bit better.
I think one of the things that would have hurt me the most, and there's been many mistakes that I've regretted, but if it had happened the next week, wow, like that's, you can't have had the fault and then the next week be like, oh, it happened again because we've not solved that problem. I didn't do enough hours last week, or I didn't push the software guys, or That's inexcusable, I think.
That's a good segue for our final topic or theme, which is really planning at scale. So obviously there's a ton that goes into getting a driver and a car ready for race day and even during race day. How do high-performing teams plan?
I think no differently than the businesses that I've been involved in. I think the significant difference is, one, like I say, we know what our objective is. You start planning around those objectives, making sure that the first order stuff to achieve that objective is top of your list. But I think also for us anyway, a Formula One team, the significant difference is once you've laid that plan out is the execution. It happens much quicker and with much more intent. It's just the execution happens. And that's driven, I think, for us by the fact that the value of winning is high, and you know if you execute quickly, you've got an advantage over your competitor. And two, the first race date doesn't change, right? Either you do it or you're not racing. And I think we saw that with Williams recently. They only had a couple of cars there, and they had to miss a race, I think, Sargent, which is, to me, that is criminal. Criminal. You can't do that. So the date doesn't change for us, and that means we work all hours to make sure we execute. And we also plan such that we know what that date is, and we start early enough.
What about autonomy of teams and then alignment to whatever your optimization problem is? How do you balance in a smaller organization and even in a larger organization in F1 the autonomy that you want to drive for those different teams to come up with solutions versus them going off and doing science experiments that are not aligned with your goals? Because that's planning at scale for a big organization. How does that work?
Again, for us, the objective is pretty clear, right? So if you have clear objectives and you remind people of what you're trying to do, then you don't go off and do science experiments, right? You actually do practical stuff that's going to get you to your objective. But autonomy for me is key. If you have experts in their area, you got to let the experts do what they're good at. A manager just brings them back or reminds them of the objective. That's all you have to do. Do not micromanage. Do not, if you have subject matter experts, they're going to be better at it than you are. Don't micromanage. Even if you're better than they are at that subject, don't micromanage. No one wants to be micromanaged. I don't like it when my wife is looking over my shoulder when I'm trying to make my peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Ooh, there's too much jelly. Get out of here. Do not micromanage.
How does that work out for you, by the way?
You're much, much better off. Subject matter experts, let them decide. Am I right, Bernie?
Yeah, I agree with that.
And did I do that as a boss?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, well, the best example I have of that is on the pit wall, there's sort of 2 race engineers, myself, and then a head of race engineering. And then on the other side of the pit wall, there's sort of Otmar and the sporting director and some other people. And when we're making decisions, live decisions during a race, I don't think I've ever heard Otmar come on the radio and say, oh, I wouldn't do that. You know, that's never been said. And that gives you the freedom to make those decisions, come to the right answer, get to where you need to be. And within any organization, you know, when Otmar talks about the floor problem, which I was at Alpine, or the suspension problem, like that wasn't affecting the race engineering design. I wasn't sitting on my desk in between those 2 races worrying that the suspension was going to make it to the next one. I had to trust that the bits of the organization that were involved would make that happen, and that my group needed to be ready for when that happened for the next race. So certain groups within the organization just need to sit back and go, right, I trust that these guys have got it. That's going to happen. And, you know, the prime example that many of you have seen at home is, and it amuses me every time I see it, because my other half is a mechanic, and there's a good engineer-mechanic dynamic where there's one of us to blame for lots of things that are going on in the garage. But anyway, when a car's had an accident, big accident in P2 or P3 or whatever, and there's a load of mechanics in that garage trying to get that car out for the next session, and the timer's running, you know it's running, you can hear the other cars getting ready to go, to have someone in Otmar's position or my position stood in the garage isn't helping. No. I don't need to go into the garage and tell the guys the car needs to be out in 5 minutes. The guys know the car needs to be out in 5 minutes. So I need to be on the pit wall in my normal position, ready to go with the normal information as if that car is going to roll out of the garage, because I need to trust those guys. And the other big example of it, and it's comedy at times really when you look at it, but this is how focused we are. There will be sessions, normally in Japan, where you feel like you're in the middle of a monsoon and you can see it's just like sideways rain. And then it's like 15 minutes to go, we go out and do our radio checks, even in the monsoon rain. And it's as clear as day that that session is probably not going to happen. But what if it does? Why are we not ready? Like, our bit of the organization still needs to be ready for that to happen. So you have this autonomy to still get your bit right. And sometimes you'll be roped into the crisis management, but generally not. You know, generally there are situations happen. If the crisis is in strategy, then yeah, you know, I'm deep in that, but I still need someone in the strategy group to be doing all the normal stuff, because when the session kicks off, that's still going to happen. We had an example on the pit wall where our pit wall went down and we had no data. And it was chaos. You know, I was counting the car go back manually, it was just counting it go past the line. So you have this crisis management system, but the other people in the background are still working to the normal process to make sure things happen in the normal way.
Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, can't remember how many races he's won, 54 or something. Used to winning races, comes to race for us at Aston. I don't think we had a chance to win a race then, although we did finish second in Baku with him. Should have won in Hungary, would have been thrown out anyway for the fuel situation.
Yeah, that's not my bit. That's someone else's bit.
But Sebastian, every race, would ask the tire engineer, whose job was to measure the surface roughness of the track. Remember? You'd go out, Sebastian would ask him to measure different spots on the front straight so he understood where the highest grip level was on the front straight. And the reason he wanted to know that was at a restart, which was low probability anyway, and he was in the lead, he would know exactly where to accelerate, where he had highest grip, and his competitors behind him didn't. But it's through that detail of, just in case I'm leading the race, just in case there's a restart, I want to know where the highest grip level is. And we would do those things regularly, even if there's not a big probability of that ever happening. But you needed to do it. No stone unturned. And the other thing I want to say about not micromanaging and decision making, I learned this at university, not through Formula One. And the question, this is a political science class, was if you're in a group and you have a subject matter expert, but it's a pretty big group, do you listen to the subject matter expert, or do you listen to everybody and then take a vote? The answer is subject matter expert. And the example, I think you'll remember forever. So imagine there's 15 of you that just descended Mount Everest. Now you're coming down, and there's a storm coming that you didn't anticipate, and you've got a decision to make on the path that you take down. Do you sit and take a vote, or do you listen to the Sherpa that's been up and down for 50 times? And you listen to the Sherpa, and that'll stick with you forever. When you're in those situations, listen to the subject matter expert. And in Formula One, we do that a lot.
So just closing thoughts, listen to the Sherpa. CK, any final thoughts from your end?
I just think there's so much to learn for the companies that we work with in terms of the speed of decision making and So that's my main takeaway is speed of decision making and designing systems and technology that allow us to make those decisions faster and get better.
And if you can do that and your competitors don't, you'll have a huge competitive advantage. Huge. If you can develop whatever it is at a quicker rate than your competitors because of your quicker decision making, quicker implementation, you'll have a massive advantage. Massive.
Let's give Bernie and Otmar a round of applause. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for joining us for Driving Systems of High Performance, a podcast from Atlassian and Accenture. Thank you so much to our special guests, Bernie Collins and Otmar Szafnauer, for sharing their insights today. You can check out more about the work Atlassian and Accenture are doing using the links in our show notes. We'll be back with more conversations soon. Follow us now in your podcast app and you won't miss an episode.